Welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
All right, this is the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art. And if you guys aren't already subscribing or following us, make sure you click on that little thumbs up on there so you can get notifications once we get a new episode out. We try to get one at least every week. We're almost getting to episode 50, Todd. Here we,
That's
finally.
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
How many people are following? Do you know? I've only seen the YouTube numbers. I haven't seen anything else.
So on, obviously you can see the YouTube, but I mean, the last time I checked, we had 28,000 listens on Spotify. That's not even checking Apple. So that's just Spotify alone. And then we have followers, like 867 followers on Spotify.
Wow.
So we get about 350 or so plays per episode. And we have, I don't know what audience size means. That's the last 7 days, 409 people. So, but we also get a lot of new people because I can see who the new people are.
Size doesn't matter, Art. You know that.
What?
I said size doesn't matter.
We have the smallest crowds.
No, that's great. That's awesome. I'm stoked that other people want to hear our voices too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this one is interesting. I tried to get you to tape yesterday. So,
I know.
Yeah, I was trying to get a post out, and I'll tell you that in and of itself is interesting to try to constantly find something that can be, have any value to it. And I was doing a post on logic and reasoning. And my belief is the simple way I put it is dogs don't understand the word because. So if you've allowed your dog to do something once, they're going to assume they can do it like small children. Like a 2-year-old child, if you let them run around the Walmart parking lot late Sunday afternoon because there's nobody in it, they're going to think they can run around it Monday morning when it's full of cars. They're not going to understand the fact that the cars make it different or dangerous. They're just going to know I run in the parking lot. That's my take on it. So in the absence of logic or reasoning, if we allow something to happen, plan on it happening again in that situation, because that just is how the brain is now going to operate behaviorally. And so these ditches fill up next to me, and Blue likes to run in the ditches. And, the point is when I get next to ditches that are full of water that I don't want her to run into, I have to act as if she's going to, because she doesn't know I don't want her to run in them because the water has been standing there for a couple of days. Right.
Logically, we're like Giardia bacteria.
Correct. And if she had logic, I could just be like, whatever. Hey, she would know. She would know it hadn't rained in a couple of days, and that was something there. So to me, like, you have to teach it with a limit or context. So if you allow a dog to do something, you have to limit it so they don't always do it. I'll let her chase squirrels once in a while. I can stop it. That's exactly kind of the same type of thing. There's not a ton of logic behind them. So if you can do it, you can do it. And so I went on the internet and I went to get a definition of logic. And then for whatever reason, I went, do dogs have logic? To see what the internet said. And the internet was dumb as fuck. And it got me fired up. And it really started this whole process in my mind of what is the point behind why some of these people are trying to, what seems like, I don't want to say intentionally misinform, but that is kind of where it's coming from. Okay. And so, I mean, from the amount of scientific energy going into proving dog intelligence and proving dogs are everything but dogs. I went through a few tests and scientific studies that I saw in this, and in my opinion, quickly brought variables into it. So one of them was a visual test on the dogs to see if they could make an inference on where something wasn't, like the nutshell game. Mm-hmm. It was something to that effect. And I quickly went, well, it doesn't look like using the nose as a variable. So if you think this dog's only going to be using its eyes to find something to make a decision, it knows where its nose, it knows whatever you're looking for, where it's at, just on that. Again, my opinion. So variables not being brought in. So here's one of the things that I read that really kind of went, are you serious? They don't even hear their own asinine stuff. So here is the last sentence of a paragraph. Here, I'll just actually read the whole paragraph too, so you guys can read what this person was trying to prove. You can even hear the language in it. So it's time to find out if our dogs can think logically or if they're simply on autopilot as proclaimed centuries ago by respected scientists and philosophers. The arrogant analysts of the past were positive humans occupied all realms of thinking, while animals were driven by their basic instincts. There are archaic dog trainers who agree with this long-held belief and encourage us to be leaders of a human hierarchy where the family mutt follows instruction from the head of the pack. All right.
This sounds very biased already.
So obviously, right? So this was an article on WAG.
This is pseudoscience, by the way. This is
very
science.
much so. You can hear in the languaging, right? So that was the part that I'm like, okay, awesome. So this is the part I want you to compare. Her last sentence was, there are archaic dog trainers who agree with this long-held belief, encourage us to be leaders of a human hierarchy where the family mutt follows instruction. Now, this is how she concludes this, dude. Researchers believe wolves and dogs are no smarter than each other, but the way that they are wired is different. Thousands of domesticated years have created traits that make our dogs similar to toddlers who look to mom and dad for logical solutions to problems. So they're not pack animals with a human hierarchy where the family mutt follows instructions from the head of the pack, but they're not kids who follow parents, who I guess you could say might be considered the head of a family pack. So
she probably takes her kids to the veterinarian and probably takes her dogs to the pediatrician.
Can you believe this? Now, if you want to know, that one of the things she references in this is that to prove logic is that when a police dog is trying to figure out how to save their handler who's being attacked, they will rush in and take a moment to logically assess all their options to figure out the safest one for the handler before acting.
Wow. Not true. But at least here's the thing, we've kind of talked about this, like when they're testing these things, like what are the variables and all this stuff, but like, have you ever been around a lot of dogs at once, like in a group? Have you ever been part of a family before? Caesar always talks about how, like, if you don't like the word pack, just use family or whatever. And here's the thing, Todd, like I really believe that we have really moved away from the concept of family. So if people don't have a good concept of what family is, then they're not going to have a good concept of what a pack is either. You know what I mean? So
you know what, Art, that has not really, that's eluded me, because I think that's just coming from the standpoint of having family my whole life.
Right. And so, dude, I mean, if you think about it, like a lot of the things, like a lot of the like trainers who are against what we do, or if you look at like, they either had a bad experience with a really like heavy-handed trainer, or they've had some trauma in their life. I'm not saying everybody. I'm not gonna pigeonhole everybody, but the people that I've seen have been very critical of certain people. They don't have a concept of what a family really is.
Do you think it could also be? I've always thought that there's a category of people that lost trust in their caretakers and their parents and the people that they were supposed to depend on. They couldn't depend on them. Right. So their trust was lost in their pack leader, their parent, however you want to see it. So that concept doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah.
It's like that they see any form of discipline as what they went through. That's their only understanding of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's like people talk as if in the absence of one thing, there can't be something else, or in the presence of one thing, there can't be something else. And that's getting problematic.
Yeah, there was a quote the other day. I saw this. Bill Maher had a quote. He says, "We need to get back to the trad dad." I didn't know what a trad dad was, and he talked about the trad dad is the traditional dad. He was like, "I'm not talking about the traditional dad that beat the shit out of you and that's a psychopath." He's like, "I'm talking about like the dad that actually cared about his family and did everything for his family and and I think that's where like these labels come in. We've talked about being masculine, feminine, things like that. We've talked like those toxic traits, like, and it was never masculine. It was just an aggressive person who perceived himself to be masculine. You know what I mean? And so as the victim sees, well, that's masculine, then I don't want anything to do with that. That's toxic masculinity. You know what I mean? And so that's where that family dynamics comes into play. But honestly, like you were before we were talking about like hierarchies, and because I was mentioned in this, but there are hierarchies without a doubt. Like,
so and how do you explain that? So let's go back a step, Art. The whole point of this particular podcast is coming from I think we're battling more misinformation that people need to be able to see through than people needing the right thing to do. Right? I don't think the answer is you need more information and this is what you need. I think people need to learn, look, here's how a dog sees the world. Now, based on that, what makes sense to you, right? If you've been a parent or you understand any form of parenting, what makes sense to you? Does it make sense to only use positive? Does it make sense to only be
Nope.
mean? Does it make, right? Where do you see parenting at? And I think understanding what a dog really is, and I think we always talk about this, is I like this phrase, in the absence of humans, which is really honoring the dog at the highest level. What is it? What do they live like? So hierarchy, what does that mean to you?
So, I mean, there's obviously different energies that handle certain things, but for me, like, I'm just gonna talk about in our family, like, I make all the decisions, but I also run everything by with my wife. Like, I don't make a decision without her. But or even like when I talk to my son, like when I have a conversation, I'm like, look, I know you don't like this, but I tell him, like, I'm the parent in here, and I'm doing this because I believe that it is the best decision for you. And I know you're gonna have a fit about it, like you're gonna be upset about it. I get it, but this is the decision that I've made because it is the best decision for you. And I don't get mad about it. I'm like, you're gonna do this, I'm like, I try not to do that either.
But what are you explaining? Are you explaining that there is an order of importance, or however you want to see it, to who's making the decisions? The
Yeah,
decisions, right? There's an order
like,
to that.
I don't know if it was you that told me one time, like, if your kid's gonna run on the street, you're not gonna say, like, you're not gonna, like, hey, you're actually gonna, like, get their attention somehow.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not gonna, or life's consequences are gonna get in the way if they run on the street. You know what I mean? You're trying to avoid those situations, and so I don't know what I'm trying to say right now. I lost my train of thought.
Let's think about it. Hierarchy. So the reason to me, it goes back to this, like, what you're seeing is it starts with, there is no dominance theory. So the people, the concept of what people have developed in one training theory has to remove somebody else's concept for it to work, is what it feels like, right? So
Mhm.
if there is no dominance theory, if we've proven that wrong, quote unquote, meaning that dogs do not organize in groups as a pack, there would never be an alpha challenge to get to the top, which, it's context on this one, we know, right? If it's a family, no, it wouldn't. But when we bring them in together, it is, right? So if they're brought in from outside, you know how that where that information came from, right? When they brought wolves together,
Mhm.
they would do that, but the family, they wouldn't. So that means that in a hierarchy sense, there would be a natural energetic order. They're not deciding it. They're not going, hey, I want to be this one. It's just that each energy has a role, right? The sensitive ones can pick up on things differently than the ones that are fast, different than the ones that are, are going to have the most strength. So they all have this role in the hunting and the family and so forth. So to me, that's hierarchy. But if you say there's no dominance, and you say there's no hierarchy, and you say there's no pack, well, then you can say there's no need for a correction. You can say that there's, you can
No need
start
for
to say,
consequence.
yeah, you can say that they don't communicate in pressure. You can say that they're, positive is the only way. You can start to say those things. And to what end, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the reasoning behind that is, because if you step back and watch dogs, all of those things are demonstrably false just in observation.
Yeah.
Right? It's not even you have to listen to somebody else. It's just demonstrably false. So the question is what are they looking at when they see dogs? What are they looking at that's different than what we're looking at? And that's the part that's so interesting. We're working with the same creature who really is not that complex,
Right.
but it's being broken down by the most complex creature on the planet. And we're seeing different things when we look at it, and then trying to sell those things to the public as the only way, the right way. And not only is it the right way, it's so right that way is wrong.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. I've gone years and years and years, and it's never really been a blip that's bothered me, but for some reason,
Yeah.
you know,
I saw a post, like, I don't know, I saw someone make a comment on Facebook, or not a comment, it was as a post. It said something about Zach George. Zach George is a positive only, keyword only, how, he's been for years, has been, very critical of people, and, calling out people, being a bully, honestly, being a bully to other people, being a troll. And there's a video that has surfaced of him, like, correcting a dog and applying, like, pressure to a dog. And so, but he's always anti-aversive, and he actually came out and says, well, sometimes aversives are important, and but I hope to be held accountable and this and that. So he's like been preaching, lying to people that positive is the only way. Yet he goes and does this thing, and then making us be the bad person. But now he's the good guy because sometimes they're important.
Why is the word aversive? Why is it the word aversive? I don't think it's aversive. Aversive is applying enough pressure intentionally that the dog will never go back in concept of that behavior. That's like snake aversion training.
Right.
That's the misconception. That's what I'm talking about, misinformed, right? We're not using aversive methods because the dog is not left in an aversive state. The dog is left in an accepting state.
Right. Well, that's the difference, Todd. That is what we always talk about, because if you have a dog that is too forward, let's say forward towards snakes, and they, use rattlesnake avoidance training, but they intentionally leave the dog in avoidance.
Correct.
That's the whole point.
Yes.
Right?
What does that mean? Explain that.
So, and to explain what rattlesnake avoidance training is.
No, explain what it means to leave them in avoidance.
Yeah. So basically, every time they see a snake or in the presence of a snake, they want to avoid it. They don't want to go to acceptance. You don't ever want the dog to go into an acceptance state of.
And how do you generate that? What is the training? It's just mass pressure, right?
Right, a lot of pressure. And usually they use an e-collar.
Yes.
But they intentionally do that. Now, I think, and that's where I think people have the biggest problem with these like franchise companies, is because, who just use e-collar, is because they can use an aversive, like a high level e-collar, and then the dog just avoids that. Let's say the dog's reactive and they push a button.
Yep.
They don't ever allow, because then now the dog sees a dog, and then they want to avoid the situation. So to the client, they say, wow, they're not reacting anymore. But they are reacting. They're just not being vocal about it. They're more like, oh shit, I need to come over. I need to avoid the situation, right? Now, what we can do differently, talking about us, or what we see, how we see it, is that yes, you can get them to a point where they avoid, but then you get them to go and accept the thing that they were reacting to.
And well, that's only the forward dogs. I'm never taking a dog that was like reacting through anything that had avoidance in it, but you just find that a dog that is super aggressive has to avoid before it can accept. And if you understand the path, because oftentimes before it got to aggression, it was an avoidance. It accepted, avoided, aggressed. Right. So avoidance is like a rest stop. You're always going to see it, and it's curious, and that's what I was saying earlier, is that in the presence of that, something that triggered a dog to look away doesn't mean, unless those e-collar trainers are bad for business in the sense that they make things look in ways they're not. And they support the argument that corrections are bad, like you just explained, because they leave dogs aversive. There's a trainer here that bashed me, and he had an e-collar to somebody I worked with. And he goes, when your dog looks at that dog, blast him. That was his advice. Right. And it's like, okay, that's not the way, but it just leaves them, like you said, in this. So back to the Zach George thing.
Oh, so he was just basically saying that, sometimes aversives are important. And, if you look at because you said, and I always say this, that the path to acceptance is through avoidance, whether it's a forward dog or even a flighty dog. Like they have to go through. And here's the thing: anytime I see a dog that let's say they're fearful, they're like flighty, but they start to avoid as opposed to flight, I'm like, oh, we're making progress. Anytime I see avoidance, I'm like, oh, we're making progress. Yeah. Right. You go too forward, and I see a little bit of avoidance, I was like, oh, I can build this dog up. And same thing with the dog that's fearful, and they want to give me distance and space. Like I know once I get a little bit of acceptance, I can build up on the avoidance to get into acceptance.
Do you think it's just because they just don't understand? Because the same people that use the word aversive laugh at their dog when it's avoiding, like, because it seems like it got in the trash. Oh, he did something wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they see that trainer, oh, that's terrible that you did that to that dog. And on the other side of it, or when the dog's being stubborn, right? So they don't actually understand the dog's psychology of what it means to be in a state of avoidance. They only understand aversive techniques. They don't understand avoidance, the actual psychological concept of it. Do you think that's where it's coming from?
I do, because, I think when people, And maybe they only see that part of where the dog is in avoidance, right? And because sometimes the dog be like, oh wow, it's too hot. Like I don't want to get too close, you know. And so they see that thing. Therefore, all aversives are bad. You know what I mean? And can they be bad? Of course. But you have to be able to know like how much pressure to apply. And when I talk about pressure, it could be leash, it could be an e-collar, it could be our presence, it could be anything. You know, when there's different types of pressure. And so it's really important to know like when you're going to use the pressure, how much to use, so that you don't send them too far forward, you know, too far forward the opposite end of the spectrum. And so I think what happens is they see the dog in that one moment and they make a judgment based off that one moment where they are in avoidance, and they say, therefore, they're bad. Slip leads are bad. I had someone tell me that. Slip leads are bad. I saw the dog was struggling through. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't leave it there. That's the important part.
If your dog is avoidant, there is absolutely no other tool that can even work other than a slip lead. I don't care what you think you're going to do. And that was some other argument that started with somebody I'm helping and somebody she knows, saying that basically any pressure is negative. Like any and all pressure is negative, and aversive, I guess, is the same thing. Now, I'm gonna ask you some questions really quick, all along the same thing, right? And you just kind of answer them as it is. So I said, so what is dominance? Is dominance real?
Yes.
What is it? How would you explain it?
Well, here's the thing, by the way, and I'm gonna go back to like that word makes people feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because of
but
how.
Let's assume that. So what? So what? So what is dominance? Explain dominance.
Dominance to me is, if we're talking about dogs, or just the word dominance.
You know, I don't think it matters. Let's look at it in a social context, and you can look at it however you want. It can be dominant energy, being dominated. I mean, there's a lot of different applications depending on the context and the way it's being used to describe a situation. Fair enough?
Yep. So dominance to me would be someone or something that, man, that's a good one. It's not a word that I use.
I don't either. I use pushy. I use strong.
Yeah.
I will occasionally use it. So to me, you have spectrums. You have soft and firm, strong and soft, however you want to see it, dominant and submissive, and it indicates your susceptibility, if you will, to the various forms of pressure we're talking about. So as you become more dominant, you have the ability to both handle and distribute pressure more evenly and effectively. And as you become softer and more submissive, you are more affected by and have a harder time applying pressure. Fair enough?
Yeah, and dominance could also be positioning.
Planning. Like to me, the best way to look at dominance is you have to have the dominant plan, the dominant intention. And that is what the dog feeds off of, is that the confidence in your intention can be it. Now, I think people, again, let's go to the misinterpretation. How do you think it's misinterpreted? Why do you think it catches so much shit?
Because a lot of times people will, and let me answer your question. A lot of times people will feel like in their own personal life, maybe they felt that they were dominated, they were pushed really hard, too much, and so,
dominant father figure or something like that.
Right. And so, but it could, you know, if you look at it in sports, you know, the Dallas Cowboys were dominated by the New Orleans Saints, right? That's a good thing, depending what team you're rooting for, you know. But you look at, if they use that sentence, it's because one person had a better game plan. They were positioned better. They were prepared better. They had a better game plan, you know, that was prepared for that particular situation.
And what is sports? Sports is an extension of almost aggression or fighting, right? The reason sport came about was to continue competitive natures without hurting each other, which is that's why there's dominant and submissive. It's just an extension of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. As the patriarchy became negative and masculine and toxic masculinity was accepted as something universally negative. The toxic part is, but the interpretation, obviously, we can look at. You can see how everything starts to translate down. It's like tearing down statues. What's the point? It doesn't change anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like these people are trying to change something in their own selves by changing everything around them. And I'm fucking tired of it. I've kind of reached a peak stupidity level of, look, knock it off. You're not helping. You know, we change the word. Just like in that thing I just read you, she, at the beginning of it, she's this judgmental idiot. And at the end of it, she explains what she said at the beginning is exactly how it is. And beat the crap out of people along the way, making all these negative, disparaging statements to get there. And that's what I'm saying is, like, you know, you're seeing some stuff on social media and out there. People are just kind of reached the limit of it. So I don't use the word dominance either. We talked about hierarchy. How about this? Do dogs need corrections?
Yes.
And how do people mess them up?
They overcompensate or undercompensate.
Okay. So too much or too little?
Yeah.
And let's go back to what people were talking about with aversives. So if you give a correction with shitty energy and your dog goes like that, that's an aversive act. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand that you messed up and give the time to recover and relax, you leave your dog aversive.
Yep.
Right? Or worse, you try to stop your dog, but your energy is bad and off, and your dog's energy is stronger. And like we said, more dominant than yours because they can handle the pressure you're putting out, right? They can take it, and you make it worse because you just make the dog resilient and reactive to the pressure and to the means you apply.
Yep.
So there's a very small sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found the people who have the tendency to naturally give corrections overcorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who don't want to give corrections
undercorrect.
Pretty much like a pattern.
Yeah.
Who's easier for you to work with, by the way?
Who's easier for me to work with?
Yeah.
The stronger ones, because you can always take some off. It's always it's the ones that are like, I don't know, because they already feel they're doing too much.
Yep.
And then they feel like they don't want to overcompensate. They're too scared. But I can always take the heavy-handed people. I'm like, hey, just take some off. I do it all the time. Hey, too much. It's too much.
Yeah, softening confidence is much easier than generating confidence.
And by the way, because we're talking about corrections, and we talked about logic. I wrote a question down for myself when you were talking. Okay. So, is logic needed to know what a consequence is?
No.
Do you think it's because when we talked about this a couple episodes ago about when we talked about memory, associative memory, what would you call it?
So eidetic memory is exact memory. Okay, so that was just a miswording on my part. And then you have associative memory, which are two parts. And then it was which most human memory, whatever it is. And you're pulling things from different areas. Okay, so it doesn't have to be present to have the memory of it. That's the difference between humans and dogs. For a dog to have a quote unquote memory, and this is where the whole intelligence conversation, it diverges like this.
Well, that was like when you were talking, and I was like, and I agree with you. Like, dogs, they don't have logic, the way we do, or when you said they can't answer the word because. But when you were talking about that, I was like, well, do they need logic to understand what a correction is? Because if they have no memory, then how is it that they're able to remember what they're supposed to do?
I think they're making an association with all the subtleties of the energy shift in the human, just like with the parent. I mean, look at a correction from a mother dog to a puppy. So you have the early associative markers of it, the energy shift, right? Let's say that every time you correct your dog, you make a certain sound, and it's just kind of a natural sound for you. But you make that sound at the computer when you read something silly, or that and you'll see it. You can see a dog might give a similar reaction. They're associating something that they relate to that energy shift. All right. I think if dogs had logic, they wouldn't put up with us. Honest to God. I don't think they would tolerate some of the stupidity that we throw at them. How many people do this? People go like this to stop their dog and to call their dog to them. Would you tolerate that shit if you were logical and could figure it out?
This is true.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Is to what point are we helping a dog by proving they have concepts of interpreting things that I just simply don't think they have based on my experiences? and making it harder for them along the way. So we keep saying, no, let's not learn their language and learn their way. Let's prove that they know ours. And if this was actually working, and I said this at the beginning, would we be seeing an uptick and an improvement in dog behavior?
Right.
And are we?
No, because that's a good point, because if they were logical, then we wouldn't have a lot of behaviors, because we could logically have a conversation with them and don't do that.
Episodic memory. There you go. An episodic memory is pulling stuff from different places. And I always use the red Corvette as an example. Red Corvette. Right now, what are you thinking about? We're both thinking about different things, and neither one of us are in front of a red Corvette. Right? So we're pulling, and memory in humans is barely been scratched. So to believe they can figure shit out in dogs is just a whole other level of reaching for the stars, in my opinion. And again, it doesn't do anybody favors.
Yeah, actually, we were texting yesterday, I was like, it's crazy that we haven't even scratched the surface about knowing about dogs. Like, we really haven't. And it's just crazy. We know how to live with them. We know, how to get certain things, but we really don't know a lot about dogs.
Mm-mm. Do you think dogs see us as dogs? Or do you think they see us as people that have the same relatable social side?
I definitely believe that they see us as another social side, right? Because, like, it's the pack, it's the family. They do see it as an extended member. But I also do believe that they recognize us as a different species, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another very important thing that we should also keep in mind, is that, and that goes back to the studies, that they're trying to humanize, they're trying to prove that dogs are actually humans, in my opinion. And it's everything, like all of these studies, like study shows that dogs actually do remember their, who they live with or whatever. There's always these things, or they actually do have emotions. There's always this push to show that they're more human than we thought, right? And so,
Absolutely.
why?
So I don't know why, but I want to go on this now, because this one led me down the next rabbit hole of what you're saying about dog intelligence. And I have long said, and not in a disparaging way, where are you at there, buddy? Not in a disparaging way, that dogs are not smart. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying it so that owners don't overinterpret a dog's capabilities and say things like, I know my dog knows ... They don't. Your dog knows exactly what you see, right? So I think owners need to understand this small thing, because owners never really understand the way their dog receives their conversation. Like, they think they know, they assume they know, and that if they don't see what they wanted, that the dog got it wrong. That's in my opinion, one of the biggest unconscious errors being made. So if owners simply said, okay, how does my dog really feel about their name? How does my dog really feel about come here? How does my dog really feel about sit? And just say those things. And the first thing your dog does is really what they do. That's what they've learned. That's what you've taught them. That's how they feel about it. That's how they respond to it. That's what they know it means. You know what I mean? As opposed to going, oh, I know my dog knows. Mm-hmm. And so that factor, and part of it is, I think the smarter we can make our dogs, the less responsible we have to be. I think is unconsciously part of it as well.
Say that last sentence again.
I think the more intelligent we can make our dogs, the less responsible we're making ourselves for their behavior.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's my smart border collie likes to herd kids. Shut the fuck up. Stop them. Right? If they know 1,000 words, you should just be able to say, stop herding. And they should stop. But they don't know the words, dude. So I started looking at Chaser, the smartest dog in the world. And I am definitely impressed by what this is, but I am also want people to know what it's not, or at least what it's not doing. So Chaser, for those who don't know, has been labeled the smartest dog in the world, was a border collie owned by a psychologist who spent a tremendous amount of time teaching the dog. It started with naming toys and colors of toys and the ability to go get toys. And then it was the ability to get a toy based on what he didn't ask it to do. which is really where he started to go, all right, what are dogs capable of based on people saying dogs don't have the memory, like we were saying, like they don't have that style of thought process. He was trying to prove that they do. Now, we've talked about this. He spent hours a day training this dog. And in my opinion, you get to a point where you are communicating unconsciously. I do believe the dogs are almost like in a frequency at that point. Like we talked about, what if they're smelling it and seeing it in that weird way through what we saw in the brain scan? Anyways, that's what I think really is anchoring a lot of that. Well, his daughter is now a canine expert trainer and sister teacher to Chaser the Border Collie. She's written books. She's been on TV. She apparently has a very loud, not loud, wrong word. She has a strong presence in dog training. And the reason I found this post is because I asked, did Chaser bite? Just a vibe that I got.
You asked, like, who did you ask?
I asked the question to the internet to see if I could find any articles about, I wanted to know about Chaser's behavior. I don't care about Chaser's intelligence. I wanted to know how he behaved and see if there was a correlation, right? That if the dog had this level of intelligence you've tapped into, you should be able to correlate that ability to communicate to perfect behavior. My opinion. Well, that wasn't the case. Chaser, apparently there's a couple things here. So I'll go right to one and you tell me what you think about this. Okay. So this is a Q&A with this person who, again, the reason she's in this particular conversation is that she's on the agenda of dogs being super intelligent and we can teach them anything. My dog nestles up to someone wanting to be, I got to go to that one. That one's the best. This is the one I want to start with. Hi, do you think it's possible to raise a dog from a young age to be more affectionate, or is that something that's solely determined by a dog's nature? I'm going to have you answer that. What do you think, Art?
I don't think, again, it goes back to sensitivity. There's some dogs that are always going to be sensitive. Some dogs are just not going to like you. I have a dog that's not affectionate at all. She's the most amazing dog, but she doesn't like to cuddle with us. She likes to be near us, but she doesn't like the affection. We do have dogs that are affectionate. So can they be taught? I don't think so.
Agreed to some extent. I think they can be manipulated through psychological tricks, right? Leave them wanting more type of thing. So I do think there are elements that you can improve their desire. I think, but like you said, there's going to be an innate way. Now, what do you think about this answer? This to me means something. Maybe it doesn't to you. I believe in many cases that affection takes time. Chaser was not a touchy-feely dog and was into cuddles on her time, not ours. And hers is in big capital letters. Her time, not ours. What does that sound like to you? What happens if you give her affection on your time, not hers?
She's going to bite you.
That's what it sounds like to me. Sounds like Chaser nipped mom and dad, right?
Of course, we are making assumptions here, but...
We are. But that assumption's made on what?
Experience.
A bunch of experience that, and she has her in capital letters.
People use that phrase when she's like, "Oh, she don't bite you." If they know you, she has to do it on her terms.
So in our concepts of leadership, would you ever think one of your dogs would bite you if you pet it at the wrong time? In all seriousness, they may walk away a step. I can never conceive of one of my dogs.
None of my dogs. I mean,
stopping me with a snap.
Yeah, Grace. No, none of our dogs would ever do that.
Okay, so that was
Gracie will always give us space. She won't even let me touch her. So, you know what I mean? That's different. She's sensitive, and she would never bite me. But I mean, when I have put a leash on her and she's in the crate and she's like at the end of the crate sometimes because she's so nervous by my presence, she still doesn't bite me.
I want to take this a step further. I've, over the course of years, managed to work with a lot of people that have dogs that are national champions in different weird shit. And there's a consistent kind of theme I see when these people come to me for help. It's that there's a lot of pressure being put on the dog for reasons the dog may or may not be agreeing to. It's like a stage mom. So could you imagine if you had the smartest dog in the world, the amount of pressure you put on that dog every day when you work with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it could get to the point where when you disengage that dog in work, it's like, all right, dude, get away. Don't get near me. I'm done for the day. So again, what I'm trying to say is, what are we accomplishing if the smartest dog in the world and the people who trained it, because I'm going to ask you questions that are questions that this lady has answered or not answered. And that's the point, is where is it taking us?
Well, I'm just going down memory lane here because, since social media has been a big thing in the last, 15 years or whatever, I remember there was a dog here locally who was like one of the very first like influencer dogs. And I knew him, but you couldn't get him around dogs. He was okay with the dogs that he lived with, and so when they would do these events, they had to be like really careful of what dogs they got around him, because he would bite them. And he was this trained dog. Also, those dogs that come out like on TV, a lot of times they can't get around other dogs or other people, because other than the people that they work on set, they know how to work in those environments, but they can't be like a normal dog, so to speak.
Oh, I've worked with dogs that have been trained to be so avoidant of other dogs that the second a dog gets too close to them, they go from silent to biting. That's all they know how to do. Goes back to that. A lot of this positive reinforcement world reinforces avoidance. And it's interesting that they then say aversion's bad. They do it.
Yeah.
All the time. And it disengaged the dog from the natural state of mind. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing, is I want people to know there's a natural way your dog is thinking and going through life. You don't have to use methods somebody says, but in my opinion, you need to use methods based on the way the dog is thinking, learning, and communicating. And use whatever you want inside that realm. But the second you get out of it, you're not really working, as he says, working with Mother Nature. You're so far out of it. It's weird. So how would you answer this? This one is telling. Hi there. Is there any way to train or encourage my husky to be less excitable by my cat? Now, as soon as I hear one line of that, I've got a full formula ready to go. You know what I mean? I could do a podcast just on that question right now.
Yeah.
Having them cuddle is a stretch, but he definitely doesn't understand his size or my cat's play. My cat is too docile to swipe at him to help him learn boundaries. Okay, so that's the question. I can only envision what you're thinking. I've already got a formula. What would be a couple of things you'd throw out right here?
Well, here's the thing. We already know the energies of both dogs by what they're describing, right? So you got one that's in avoidance and one that is in a more fight, praise, right? So we have to be able to balance that out. And so in order to give that cat some power to balance this out, in those situations, I can use a knee collar at that moment to allow the dog to go slightly in avoidance. But again, it's to get them to be in acceptance of each other, right? The cat can't do it. And they just said, the cat is too shy to slap the dog, which in essence is the correction, right? So if the cat can't do it, we can recreate it by bringing a sensation so the dog goes into avoidance, but we don't leave the dog stuck in avoidance, because now we got two animals in avoidance, cats over here, dogs over there. It's like, okay, let's go ahead and avoidance. So now you can able to say, okay, you're avoidance, but now I need for you to come this way. I need the cat to come this way. Let's meet in the middle. Mm-hmm. Let's go into acceptance. And so for me, it's like, okay, now you're not so forward, but now we're in the same room together. The cat can't go anywhere. No one can flight. No one can avoid to a certain situation. And we just wait sometimes, right? Yeah. And then sometimes the dog's like, oh, I'm just going to lay down here. And usually when the dog does that, the cat goes, oh, that wasn't so bad. So you took control of the situation. The dog doesn't know that it was you, thinks the cat did it, but you don't leave the dog stuck in avoidance. You just say, the dog goes, oh, this isn't so bad. I can hang out with the cat. And the cat goes, oh, look, he's not so forward with me anymore. Yep. The cat goes, I'll come out.
I've raised a lot of cats and dogs personally. I've had a bunch of cat dog combinations, and anytime I get these cases, the first thing is the cat. You have to create containment for the cat. And I learned the hard way back at the very, 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 very first cat I did this with. You do not hold the cat.
Yep. I made that mistake too.
And so use like a carrier. I even suggest using the dog crate, because it's bigger, yeah. and you're preventing flight. And then the basics, a lot of exercise ahead of time. This is a great opportunity for the heavy vest. If necessary, we need the e-collar, we need something else. But in this particular case, if you leave a dog in an avoidance state of a cat, that cat's always at risk, right? So this is mandatory if you want this to work out. Because she said, is there any way that they can get along? That's acceptance, what she's explaining. She's explaining calm surrender. And so the dog has to be relaxed. The cat has to trust that the dog is under control. That's the other thing too, that even though your cat's not a pack animal, they know, like my cats over the years, I can tell know the control I have over dogs. And it's just like your dogs, they can tell. So the more control you have over the excitement of the dog, the more the cat can trust the dog. The less control you have, the cat can tell. It's different. I mean, we talk about this all the time with dogs. The dogs know when we have control. So, that's easy. We're done. Problem solved. Answer. It really depends on how long they have known each other. I would think that the cat would eventually teach the husky not to get so overworked. And if the cat is not running, the husky won't get wound up. Keep an eye on them. Sometimes huskies can be a little overzealous in their play with little critters. That's the answer.
Overzealous, huh?
That's the answer, dude.
Which means that she's never worked with a husky before.
Means that she doesn't understand the concept of controlling excitement.
Yeah.
So think about that. If you can't go into
on their own terms,
on an answer to control something like this, what do you think happens if reaction or aggression comes into play? Do you think she can conceivably deal with that?
Probably
now, in
not.
this forum, there's no questions about that. But I mean, think about that. And this is a person that, again, and I'm not disparaging this. My point is we're putting these people, like their voice has a very strong level of importance because they've done something with intelligence, but how are they correlating intelligence with what really is happening? We're trashing a dog's mind. We're literally destroying the way that their brains are working. And we know this through the behaviors that we're seeing. Massive obsessive behaviors, massive anxieties, fears. Dude, there was a couple got thrown in jail for 10 or 15 years because their dogs killed this old person. And I see a photo of the dog, and it's this giant pit bull taking on 3 firefighters fully tooled up, and this dog's ready to go. And I mean, that's real out there now. So we need to do better in the big picture of knowing how that stuff is working. And that's all about being, I mean, obviously responsible, but informed the right way. So that was the whole point of, when I went down this, I started to see some of these questions and I was like, Now she does have some good points. What's interesting is that when somebody asks if dogs feel spite, she's like, no. So in some areas, it's a direct correlation with the way I would perceive things. And in other areas, it's almost like again, if you've studied dogs that long and you think you can get away with not correcting a dog that's excited, what have you been studying? You're trying to make a point something's not there. You're not trying to study what is there. You're disproving something that's in front of you.
Todd, do you think it has anything to do with, because look, I just went and explained how one way I could do it to get the cat and husky along. And, Lynn and I have had this conversation before, because I say to use an e-collar, there's a lot of variables that go along with that, right?
Right.
Knowing how sensitive the dog is. It's not just put an e-collar on a dog and then blast it at a certain number. It's like knowing like the sensitivity of the dog, right? And like all these, there's so many things that you have to take consideration other than just putting an e-collar on the dog. There's so many things that through experience, that I know that the responsible thing to do is get with a professional that you trust, right? Because what I don't want to see is, what she's saying is safe, okay? And what I'm saying could go south real quick, right?
True. Very true.
So I don't want to be responsible for people doing that thing, right? And so if you have any doubt, if people are listening and are trying to accomplish that, if you have any doubt, then I would probably suggest seeing someone that you trust, like a professional that you trust, that you can make that happen.
You want to know what I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is that no matter what, the most important thing, in my opinion, in any situation you're in, no matter what it is, how big or small, is can you hold a picture of what you want in this moment right now?
Yep.
Do you have the ability to understand, is this an excited dog moving forward? And if so, what is the intention of this dog? Is this a harming intention or an excited intention of just play? And do you understand what it means when the dog is moving away? And can you understand the intensity of that? And then from that understanding and formulate a plan, or at least an idea of what you would like to see. That's the thing, is if you work without a plan, nothing matters. And as people start to say dogs are smarter and smarter, it means the human has to do less and less of the planning and execution, because the dog will figure out more and more of the problem. They won't. They will not. And part of my training style is to give the dog the opportunity to figure out the problem.
Yeah.
We do that over, that's that participation in the lesson.
Yep.
What we've been able to figure out is if you give a dog too much, they will fall apart.
Yep.
And that amount is relatively tiny if we're speaking in intellectual terms of a human, of sorting out a problem.
Yeah.
And that's, again, where it goes back to where it's always harming things, right? And then this concept that, okay, these things are extreme. Positive means everything you do from a positive point of view will create positive outcomes. And anything that has an aversive, the word they like to use, in it will create aversive outcomes, right? So these extreme languages taking you in extreme directions is not helping anybody. And my client the other day, I mean, this was one of the first things out of her mouth was, oh, I read that I shouldn't do that. And again, all these things are harming our clients and harming dogs tremendously, because they're not, even now, a lot of people say it doesn't matter where your dog walks in front of you. I had some trainer, it was a dog trainer, give me a what did she, it was something making fun of the fact that when I suggested how I walk my dogs, I give permission for explore. The fact that I give permission for explore made me a dickhead. As opposed, you know what I mean? And so that we're at peak stupidity in thinking dogs have enough intelligence to be able to formulate differences. Oh, I'm not pulling on the leash because I'm peeing versus I'm pulling on the leash because I want to charge at that dog versus I'm pulling on the leash because I want to say hi to my friend.
Yeah.
Right?
It depends. That's my saying. Would you, in this situation, would you XYZ? Well, it depends. Depends on what? Depends on the dog, depends on the situation, depends on the environment. There's so many variables, like it just depends. That's why, like, giving advice over the internet could be, it just depends.
Oh, it's tough, dude. I mean, it's super hard. I'm dancing that dance every day, trying to give a post, just like you said. I mean, the moment you say correction, look at all the variables that open up to that. The moment you say do this, we understand the variables that open up to that. All right, there's tons of them. Here, I got another question for you. Can you fix aggression with only positive methods?
No.
Why not?
Because you're limiting yourself. And, it's just, positive is great, but it has limitations. Same thing with anything else. You have to have a balance of both. And I really think that, no.
Okay, so I'm going to read something to you, and you tell me where this interpretation is coming from. Okay? So that it's not like I'm not pulling this stuff out of thin air. Well, here's another way. This is another assumption made. I knew there was a reason I wanted to go to this. Are corrections pain?
No.
Why is that assumption made? Because look right here. So I firmly believe that check it out. So this is somebody sent me an argument that went back and forth. This is a trainer, or I think she's a trainer. I firmly believe that aversive training methods do not save a dog's life. They may in the moment appear to correct the behavior. Exposing them to fear or pain has the ability to only make things worse for them in the long run. Now she's explaining,
that's using fear right there, by the way. That's using fear.
She's explaining something right, but she's not explaining the whole thing. We just said if you leave a dog in an aversive mindset, right, what will happen? They don't even understand the difference of what that means, because right away, anything that's a correction is automatically aversive. It's automatically pain and it's automatically fear. Why is that?
I don't know, but they're using the same technique that they say we do by using fear. They're using fear by using words to misinform people, to give the half truth of again, it's half the information. They take one moment in time and say, oh, yep, it's painful. The dog's in discomfort. What's your question? Why?
Yeah. Why do they think
because it doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit. Dude, there's this whole thing going on right now with Dr. Melanie
Oh, here
Ude.
we go. I study under positive reinforcement trainers that specialize in aggression. That is an oxymoron, in my opinion. That's like jumbo shrimp. What does that mean? Because that's why I just asked you the question. Is it because
Well,
their interpretation of an aggressive dog is that it's just excited, reactive, like level 5, level 6?
well, the definition I think I heard. What's his name? I forgot his name. The trainer from Buffalo, New York. Why am I forgetting his name? Chad? No. Anyways, years ago, I remember he had an argument about like what is the definition of punishment. The definition of punishment is to decrease behavior, right? So the definition of positive reinforcement is to add something to increase the behavior. So we take that definition itself. You're adding something to increase the behavior. So what is the behavior we're trying to increase? You're actually trying to take something away,
Right.
right? So if anything,
But
we're
once
taking.
you take it away, you're increasing something. You're increasing positive association or calm association, right? But you have
That's not their definition though.
Okay.
Their definition is to add something positive to increase the behavior. So what is the behavior? If the dog is aggressive, is moving forward, what is that we're trying to reinforce at that moment, right? Because and they're like, well, it's over threshold. It's over threshold. Can't go. It's just too much threshold. The dog's too forward right now, right? So let's move back.
So that's their answer is that, and when it's in that way, you just can't work it.
Right.
So that's how they relieve themselves of the responsibility of that method right there.
Yep.
Wow.
So let me go, and then they say, well, maybe you should go see a veterinary behaviorist. Okay, veterinary behaviorist goes, yep, we got to medicate it. So now the dog had no decision in making to take this medication. The vet said to do it, and the owner gives it. And so now we're forcing the dog. So who's forcing who?
Man.
Right? And so like they're like, oh, they use force. Oh yeah, well you just forced this dog. This dog had no consent whatsoever in taking this medication. You consented. The vet gave you the recommendation. You basically gave this, the dog. So who's forcing who?
Yeah.
Right? Don't even start with that. I just that shit gets me all fired up.
Well, we have to have a long, steady career. You have to have a shield to this. But every once in a while, like I said, there's just a chink in the shield, and it comes in, and I'm choosing to deal with it by saying, hey, look, these people are wrong. And it's not wrong by it's wrong by experience over and over again, not just by me, but by dozens of people that with thousands, tens of thousands, tens and tens of thousands of dogs. And we get a chance to work with all kinds of trainers who have used all kinds of methods, seemingly, I think, everything that's out there. And if there was a way out there that had a magical way against some of these behaviors, I think we would know it, and I think we would use it.
Yeah.
I really do. And so to me, I understand everybody's point of view. I understand why these people who have a problem with, essentially they have a problem with pressure.
Yeah.
Have a problem with that. That's what they have a problem with. I can understand why. I can understand it because there's a lot of people that do it poorly, do it wrong. I mean, look at some of the videos Lynn was doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, those are perfect examples. But to speak of it then as in extreme languages where it's like the gun versus the handler, right? It's not the techniques that are hurting the dogs. It's the way that people are using the techniques. It's like the guns don't hurt people. It's the way that people use the guns hurt people.
Yeah.
So it's you can give a slip lead to somebody and they can make it look terrible, or you can give a slip lead to somebody and they can make it look artistic. It's not the slip lead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's no. Oh, some people make the e-collar look unbelievably phenomenal. Owners tend to struggle with it, but I mean, people have been using it for a long time. Make that thing look like a magic wand, but then it gets a bad rap. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a whole podcast right there as far as misunderstanding something. But again, that tool is all about pressure. Nobody sees it as communication. People don't see pressure as communication. They only see it as something that's, oh, when I feel pressure, I feel bad, and I don't want to feel bad.
Yeah.
So,
oh, shit. This is a good one.
That's all I got to say about that. That's all I got to say about that.
Gen A.
That's all I got to say. Oh, you know what? My last one here was, so to stay on that open-minded topic, are we the ones interpreting and communicating to dogs incorrectly, or is that other side we're talking about?
What do you mean? Who's the other side?
So the other side is the side that says dogs are super smart, purely positive, threshold's been crossed, right? The ones that remove the natural methods that dogs communicate to each other with, right? So you and I can get by just fine with not doing any commands and not doing any obedience, without doing any of that. And we can get a dog to follow us on a leash. We can get all of that type of stuff. The way we communicate has to do with reading the direction the brain is moving, the intensity we interpret that moving, and then we take that to mean, that friendliness, so to speak, acceptance, fear, avoidance. Versus the people that are, oh, that dog is sad or traumatized, like the emotional, humanized. The dog is much more human than we think, complex. Which one is it?
What's the question again?
Are we wrong, or are the people that see dogs in that way incorrect?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't think we're wrong, but it's not that I don't want to look at it as right or wrong. I just think that we like to look at it as a more natural sense. Like, I believe that training was created by humans for humans to, in our way, communicate with the dog. But the way we look at things, I believe that even our presence is a form of communication. Like, we don't have to use, like, we communicate verbally. That's how you and I are communicating right now. But we try to talk to our dogs through obedience, sit, stay, all these things to get something, right? Now, we can still get, I mean, honestly, like, remember when I first met Colleen and we did a group class there at the DPC, and I would tell the students, my dog, if you could tell my dog sit, they don't even know what that means. I don't care that they know how to do those things. I just want them to be, like, I can take them anywhere. I can, go out and see they're just very neutral to the environment. You know what I mean? That's really what I'm after. I'm not really trying to get a dog to be the smartest dog, I want a companion, obviously, but the companionship is also understanding who they are.
How come they never, you hear these people talk about fight, flight, avoidance, and surrender. Acceptance isn't understood. Like, the concept of acceptance is what you just explained. Like, our dogs live in a state of acceptance. We're actually really good at triggering, conditioning, creating acceptance. And then you just take that acceptance and you put it in different environments and different situations, and we just repeat it. You never hear that language.
Yeah.
You never hear that.
One of the things that we talked about also is, because we talk about tools and methods, and this has been the last thing we talked about, but we talked about how the pack, like that, having a pack to us is very valuable, right? And so there's so many things that you can help a dog out with a pack, and just like a family, if you get a dog who doesn't know how to socialize with dogs or has been attacked by dogs, you use other dogs to help it become a dog.
Over and over and over again, right?
And one of the things that, with reactivity, especially if you get a dog that's like really reactive toward dogs, it's because it could be because of excitement, it could be fear, it could be an attack at one point. But once you're able to bring it in with a bunch of dogs and move together, that right there is a really like magical fix. You get them in the pack and they know how to be with the pack, and then you separate them. Or what I've done in the past is, like, we had a dog named Dolly that we worked with. She was a Mexican street dog, and we just got her in the pack. We just got her in. She was reactive, and we worked her through it, and she was like, oh, maybe I can't do this anymore. Then we started taking dogs out. So we had 4 dogs at once, and we did 3 dogs. We started walking with 3 dogs, and we did 2, then we did 1, and then it was just that dog by himself. And so she understood that I don't have to react to other dogs. I know what it feels like to be around other dogs, and I can feel safe around them, And so they've accepted going to acceptance of the dog, so that when they see a dog on the street, they don't need to go into a fight or flight or avoid.
You just said something big about safety. That's the thing that I think we lean into, is that discipline creates safety. And there's the other philosophy is that it doesn't. So think about the difference there, is that we believe what we do, the structure, if a dog stopping a behavior correction doesn't, we believe they actually create a sense of safety in the dog. And what that you said earlier, they're fear mongering that those things don't. And that's an interesting difference. It's a real interesting difference that's kind of where things are. And like you were saying, the pack, what I've also tend to see is that the approach that uses very verbal, emotional, intellectual, obedient approaches has a strong limitation with 2 dogs, 3 dogs, right? So if you go into a home that's got 3 dogs and they're having issues and you bring that approach in, it's very ineffective because you're not tapping into anything. You're not teaching a pack walk, which now I'm starting to get people are sending me videos that you have this whole now group of trainers that are saying pack walking is bad for dogs and that, it doesn't make a difference if where your dog is at and all these different things. And so every little detail that we use with effectiveness, I'm getting videos people are sending to me one at a time that are saying, oh, no. And you're getting some of these videos that have hundreds of thousands of views, tens of thousands of likes of people going, oh, okay, so a dog doesn't need to walk that way. And so the amount of confusion out there is pretty massive.
Yeah.
I hope we cleared it up. I didn't want I felt hot, dude. It's just, I didn't want to beat, but I want to stop acting like this conversation doesn't need to be had at least, or that it's not happening out there. And the people with the loudest voices with the least experience that claim to know the most, it's like, stop, ask questions for starters. Ask questions. I'll answer your questions. You can't seem to answer mine, but if you have questions about it, ask me.
Yeah,
I will answer them. But you going on and on about all of this stuff, and look, I'm not coming from a standpoint of I've read a few books and I did some training courses at Petco. I mean, imagine the numbers of dogs just between you and I that we've handled, the number of hours dogs have lived with us, the amount of, the amount of intimate time spent with dogs. This is different than training a dog. And so that's the lessons that we're trying to help people take and use on their own. So thank you for listening. I'm done. I'm done. I won't do it again. I promise. We'll talk about Frisbee next time.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Dog Psychology Podcast. We're going to cut it off here because we've kind of gone over, but you know what? That's happened sometimes. Again, if you guys aren't following or liking, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up on YouTube and then subscribe to us on Spotify and YouTube. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
All right, guys. Peace.